Welcome back. Tonight, we are drifting slowly into the complete timeline of God of War, from the very first breath of creation, through the long and terrible age of the Greek gods, through blood and ash and consequence, and forward into the cold, quiet forests of the Norse world, where a father and his son walk through a story older than both of them could ever know. This is a universe built on the weight of time. Pantheons rose and then fell beneath their own contradictions. A man became a monster and then spent a lifetime trying to become something else. The heavens were not eternal. The gods were not invincible. And the things that men carry in silence, grief, guilt, love, held too tightly, shaped the fate of worlds more profoundly than any blade ever could. Tonight, we will move through all of it. We will begin in chaos, in the first unmade darkness before the world had form, and we will watch as the Titans shaped the earth and the Olympians claimed it from them. We will follow a Spartan soldier named Kratos, from his earliest years on the fields of war, through a bargain made in desperation, through loss so complete it became a wound the world itself could feel. We will watch him rage across Greece, climb Olympus, bring the sky down, and then disappear. And we will follow him north, into snow and silence, where he built a second life and fathered a second child and believed, perhaps, that he could finally be still. We will walk with Kratos and Atreus through the 9 realms of Norse mythology. We will meet Freya and Mimir and the world's serpent who swims through time itself. We will discover what Fimbulwinter means and what Ragnarok truly is, and why a boy named Loki carries more consequence in his small frame than any of the gods around him suspect. This is the story of how rage became grief and grief became love, and how love, carried far enough forward, changes everything. Whether you are uncovering these details for the first time, letting familiar echoes pull you deeper into rest, or simply allowing the tale to wash over you like a slow current as sleep takes hold, this will carry you through the full, unbroken timeline of God of War. Before we begin, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy this kind of slow, immersive storytelling that unfolds like a dream. And let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Because the people who close this video early will never know what waits at the very end of Atreus' journey. And it changes everything. Let's begin. In the beginning, there was nothing. And nothing in this universe was not simply emptiness. It was a presence, a dark and churning formlessness that existed before time had learned to move forward, before light had a surface to rest upon, before the concept of a world had been imagined by any mind. The primordial chaos did not wait. It simply was, in the way that deep water is, in the way that silence is, not an absence of something else, but a thing entire unto itself. From this chaos, the first beings emerged, not born so much as condensed. The way frost forms on cold stone, slowly and inevitably. These were the primordials, the oldest things that would ever exist, and among them, the most significant were Gaia and Uranus, the earth and the sky, who together became the first architecture of a world that was still deciding what it wanted to be. Gaia was not merely ground. She was the foundation of everything that would ever stand, the slow and patient accumulation of stone and soil and deep-running time. And Uranus, above her, was possibility, the vast open canopy beneath which all things would eventually unfold. From their union came the Titans, 12 of them at first, enormous beings of pure elemental force, each one a personification of some quality the young world needed in order to understand itself. Kronos, the eldest, was time itself. Rhea, his sister and his wife, was the flow of things, the current that carries life forward. Hyperion was the high sun. Themis was divine law, the sense that certain things were right and certain things were wrong, a principle the world would test endlessly and find no satisfying answer to. Oceanus was the great river that the ancient world believed circled all land, the boundary between the known and the unknown. Mnemosyne was memory, perhaps the most quietly important of them all, because without memory, nothing that happened would mean anything, and everything that followed in this long story depended absolutely on meaning. The Titans ruled the cosmos in what later ages would call the Golden Age, a time of abundance and ease that existed in memory more than in record, the way the best parts of childhood exist, softened by distance into something more perfect than they could possibly have been. The world was young, and the Titans moved through it, with the unhurried confidence of beings who could not imagine anything coming after them. They built, they shaped, they looked upon the world and found it sufficient. But Uranos, their father, was afraid. The primordials had whispered to him, or perhaps he had simply felt it, the way large things feel the approach of change before it arrives, that his children would one day rise against him, that the children always rise against the father, that this is simply what time does. It produces something that eventually turns and consumes the thing that made it. And so, Uranos, rather than accept this, did what fear so often makes even the most powerful things do. He acted against it. He took his children, the Titans, and cast them into Tartarus, the deepest and most unreachable place in the cosmos, a pit beneath the underworld where darkness was not merely an absence of light, but a living, pressing, suffocating presence. Gaia grieved, and grief in beings of this magnitude does not simply sit quietly inside. It moves outward. It becomes intention. She fashioned a sickle from the hardest stone she could find. Adamantine, they called it, the metal that the world would one day learn to call chaos forged. And she gave it to her son, Kronos, the youngest of the Titans, the one Uranos had not yet imprisoned because he had not yet feared him enough. Kronos took the sickle, and he did what his mother had shaped him to do. He overthrew his father. He castrated Uranos and cast him beyond the edges of the sky, and from the blood that fell into the sea, other things were born. The Furies, the Erinyes, the relentless ones, who would become the enforcers of oaths and the punishers of those who broke the natural order. They were born from violation, and they would spend eternity responding to it. Kronos freed the Titans, and the Golden Age resumed, or seemed to, because Kronos had heard the same prophecy his father had heard, that the children would overthrow the father. That time eats its young, and Kronos, who was time, could not escape the truth of what he was. He began to swallow his children at birth, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each of them taken into his body before they could become the threat he had been promised they would be. Rhea, his wife, endured this in the silence that comes before action. When her sixth child arrived, Zeus, she wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and gave it to Kronos in the child's place, and she carried the infant to Crete, to a cave on Mount Ida, where he was raised by the goat Amalthea and the nymphs of the island, hidden from a father who was searching the edges of the world for the thing he had been warned about and had somehow failed to swallow. Zeus grew in secret. The world outside the cave was enormous and indifferent, and it did not know he was there, but he grew, and growing things inevitably moved toward the light. The cave on Mount Ida was not small in the way that ordinary caves are small. It opened into a series of chambers that connected to older chambers, the whole complex carved by water and time into the limestone body of the mountain over geological spans that made the age of the Titans seem brief by comparison. The nymphs who tended Zeus understood that they were protecting something important, even if the full scope of what important meant was not yet visible. They fed him and taught him and kept him from the edges of the mountain, where the eyes of Kronos, ranging across the world like the eyes of someone who has lost something they desperately need to find, might eventually settle. He grew quickly, as the children of divine parents tend to grow, not merely in the physical sense, but in the accumulation of capacity, the developing understanding of himself and the world that surrounded him. He learned to feel the weather moving in the sky above the cave and understood, without being told, that his relationship to that sky was not the same as the relationship the nymphs had to it. The sky recognized him, or something in him recognized the sky, and the recognition was mutual and quiet and patient, waiting for the moment when the distance between them could be closed. When Zeus was old enough to act, he returned. He tricked his father, with the help of the Titaness Metis, whose name meant cunning, and caused Kronos to disgorge his swallowed siblings one by one. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon emerged. Grown, powerful, furious in the particular way that beings are furious when they have been contained against their will. They emerged into a world that had been arranged without them, and they intended to rearrange it. What followed was the Titanomachy, the war between the Titans and the Olympians, 10 years long, fought across the breadth of a world that shook under the weight of it. The seas heaved, the mountains cracked and reset themselves. The sky changed color from the force of things being thrown across it. It was not a war that either side expected to lose, because both sides contained beings old and powerful enough to be certain of their own permanence. The Titans had the advantage of age and experience. They had been shaping the world since before the Olympians existed, and they understood the mechanisms of it in the intimate way of craftspeople who have worked with the same material for a very long time. The Olympians had the advantage of purpose. They were fighting for something specific, for the right to exist without being swallowed, and purpose creates a quality of force that experience does not always account for. Zeus made an alliance that tipped the balance. He descended into Tartarus, where his father had once imprisoned the Titans, and freed the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed giants, who had been left there by Kronos, who had not trusted them any more than his father had. They were grateful in the way that only the very long imprisoned can be grateful, which is to say completely and with purpose. The Cyclopes forged weapons for the three brothers, for Zeus, the thunderbolt, for Poseidon, the trident, for Hades, the helm of darkness, and the Hecatonchires brought their 100 hands to battle, hurling boulders and confusion in quantities the Titans could not answer. The Titans fell. Kronos and the elder Titans were bound and cast into Tartarus, the same place Uranos had cast them, the same place they had eventually escaped. The prison held this time, sealed not with force, but with the Hecatonchires as guards, beings who had no allegiance to what was being contained and every reason to keep it that way. The world was divided. Zeus took the sky. Poseidon took the sea. Hades took the underworld, a division he accepted without visible objection, though he accepted it last and by a kind of cosmic process of elimination that would color his relationship with his brothers for the rest of eternity. The earth was shared, common ground, above which all of them had authority, and below which only one of them truly ruled. Mount Olympus became the seat of divine power. a place above the clouds where the gods assembled and argued and made decisions that rippled downward through the world like stones dropped into still water. The mortals below looked up at the mountain and felt the ripples and told stories to explain them. And the stories were not always wrong, though they were rarely complete. The Olympian age that followed was not without its internal conflicts. Zeus was not always a stable leader. He was capricious in the specific way of beings who have never been constrained by anything they could not overcome, who have learned through the accumulation of success that their judgment is reliable and have not sufficiently reckoned with the difference between judgment and preference. He loved frequently and broadly, and his loves had consequences that spread across the generations of the mortal world in the form of demigods and heroes who carried divine blood in their veins and all the complications that came with it. Athena, born from his own skull after he swallowed Metis when he heard a prophecy that the children of Metis would surpass their father, emerged fully formed and armored, and immediately more useful and more dangerous than her origin suggested. She would become the most calculating of the Olympians, the one with the longest planning horizon, the one who understood that the future is shaped not by grand gestures, but by patient arrangement. It was into this world, this settled, layered world of Olympian authority and mortal life, that a soldier was born in the Spartan city of Lacedaemon, whose name was Kratos. He did not yet mean anything to the gods. He was one of thousands of Spartan warriors trained from childhood to value nothing more than victory. He was given a body built for war and a mind shaped by the certainty that the only thing worse than dying in battle was failing to fight well enough to matter. Kratos rose through the ranks of Sparta's armies. He was fierce in the way that the best Spartan soldiers were fierce. Not chaotically, not emotionally, but with a kind of terrible efficiency that came from understanding war as a craft rather than a passion. He fought across campaigns that spread Sparta's reach and his own reputation, and he accumulated the particular gravity that the most capable warriors carry, the kind that causes other soldiers to orient toward them without quite knowing why. There was something in his presence that other soldiers felt before they consciously registered it, a quality of absolute commitment to the outcome of whatever he was doing, a quality that left no room for the small hesitations that reduce even skilled fighters in the critical moments of engagements. He was never uncertain on a battlefield, not because he was without fear, but because fear in Kratos had been trained into a tool, a sharpener, a clarifier, something that ran through him and left him more focused rather than less. He had a wife. Her name was Lysandra, and she was patient with him in the way that people are patient with those they love who have been formed by something difficult. Understanding the formation without endorsing it entirely, loving the person who emerged from it without pretending the formation had been kind. She gave him a daughter, and the daughter's name was Calliope, and Calliope was the specific kind of joy that cannot be described to those who have not experienced it. The arrival of a person who rearranges the hierarchy of everything you thought you cared about, who makes the things you believed were important reveal themselves as preparation for this. Kratos loved her with the particular intensity of someone who does not love easily, who has been trained to suppress the softer things, who has learned to protect himself through distance, and who finds himself in the presence of this small person without access to any of those protections. He played the flute for her in the rare quiet moments between campaigns. He taught her to handle a bow, because being Spartan meant preparing your children for the world as it was, and the world as it was required a certain kind of readiness. These are the details that the long story of God of War holds on to. The flute, the bow, the daughter. Because the story understands that the largest consequences are carried in the smallest containers. It was during one of his campaigns that Kratos encountered what should have been his last battle. The army of Ulrich, a barbarian king of considerable force and considerable anger at Sparta's expansions, pressed against Kratos' forces, with numbers that made individual skill insufficient. The day was going wrong, in the irreversible way that battlefield days sometimes go wrong. A cascade of small failures accumulating into a catastrophic whole, the mathematics of attrition producing an outcome that valor alone could not reverse. Kratos stood on the hillside above the slaughter of his men and faced the reality of defeat. And in facing it, he did what desperate men have done since the first divine beings established themselves above the mortal world. He prayed. He called upon the god of war. He called upon Ares, the Olympian who governed the domain Kratos had given his entire life to, and he offered anything in exchange for the power to survive and prevail. Ares came. The gods were always listening for prayers made in extremity, because extremity is where bargains are struck and debts are created, and the gods understood the economy of obligation better than they understood almost anything else. Ares gave Kratos the blades of chaos, 2 curved blades attached by long chains that burned at their edges, bound to his forearms by the chains themselves, weapons of Olympian make that could not be removed and would not be refused. The chains were not merely physical restraints. They were a declaration of ownership. "This is mine," they said. "This man belongs to the war god now, and the war will always find him, because he carries the evidence of the bargain in his own flesh." With these weapons, Kratos tore through the army of Ulrich like fire through dry wood. He won. Sparta held. The battlefield cleared, and where there had been the noise of metal and the voices of the dying, there was the quiet that follows great violence. Not peace, not even relief, but the specific absence of immediate threat that gets mistaken for both. But Ares had made another gift without telling Kratos. In order to remove the last hesitation from his new general, in order to forge from this capable soldier something truly without mercy, something that could be directed at any target and would not flinch, Ares had arranged for Kratos' wife Lysandra and his daughter Calliope to be transported to the village where Kratos was fighting. He arranged for them to be inside the temple that Kratos, in his killing frenzy, set ablaze. He arranged for the oracle of the village to curse Kratos, so that the ashes of his family would adhere to his skin and never leave. A pale coating that marked him permanently, visibly, constantly, that gave him the name the world would come to know him by: the Ghost of Sparta, the pale warrior, the man made of ash and grief. The design of this cruelty was precise. Ares wanted a general with nothing left to protect, nothing left to lose, nothing that could be used as a lever to turn him from destruction. A man whose family was alive could be threatened. A man whose family was dead, but whose grief was private, could learn, eventually, to set the grief aside and replace it with something else. But a man who wore his loss on his skin, whose every reflection in still water, whose every glimpse of his own hands reminded him of what he had done, that man could not forget, could not move on, could not find the quiet that comes from distance. He was, in Ares' calculation, the perfect weapon, aimed by guilt, fueled by an anguish that had no outlet and therefore never depleted. What Ares failed to account for was that grief of this magnitude does not simply fuel, it also purposes. It looks for somewhere to aim itself, and if the thing that created it is still within reach, it will aim itself there. The weapon Ares forged had a direction built into it from the moment the temple burned, and that direction was not away from Olympus. It was, eventually, toward it. Kratos served Ares as his general. He fought across the Greek world under the god of war's command, doing things that he would later find impossible to fully account for, not because he had not done them, because he had, but because the self that had done them was a self he could no longer entirely recognize. He carried his ashes and his blades and the silence of a man who has exchanged everything for power and found the exchange unreasonable. The nightmares were constant. Every time Kratos tried to sleep, the temple came back. The fire came back. The moment of recognition, arriving too late, understanding too late, the door already sealed and the smoke already thick, came back with the fidelity of a memory that has been reviewed so many times. It has worn grooves in the mind and settles into them automatically. Sleep became not rest, but a return to the worst moment, repeating without resolution, repeating without the mercy of even a different outcome, repeating as if the mind believed that if it returned enough times, it could eventually change what happened. After 10 years of this service, Kratos went to the other gods. He went to Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, and he asked to be released from the nightmares that plagued him every time he tried to sleep. Athena told him that the gods could forgive him his sin against Ares if he performed one final act of service to Olympus. She told him that Ares had grown too powerful, too independent, too threatening, even to his own pantheon. That the god of war was marching on Athens with an army of the dead and the monstrous, and that someone needed to stop him. She told Kratos he would be free of his memories if he destroyed Ares. She did not tell him that she would give him his memories back someday. She did not tell him that no god can truly erase a memory without erasing the person who carries it. She did not tell him very much at all, because gods, even well-intentioned ones, measure truth by what they choose to share. Kratos marched toward Athens. The city was already burning when he arrived. The streets filled with the creatures Ares had sent ahead of himself, the lost souls of his army, the mythological monsters that populated the wild places of the Greek world. Kratos fought through all of it. He moved through the burning streets with the implacability that had always been his defining quality. Not the fastest, not the most elegant, but the one who continued. The one for whom stopping was simply not an available option. He fought the Hydra in the Aegean, the many-headed serpent that rose from the deep water, with the patience of something that has no awareness of defeat as a concept. He fought it and killed it and did not pause to register the achievement, because achievement to Kratos in this period was simply the removal of the thing that had been in the way. He reached the Oracle of Athens, who told him what he needed: Pandora's box. The only weapon powerful enough to kill a god was hidden on the back of Kronos himself, the great titan who had been condemned to wander the desert of lost souls for eternity, carrying the temple of Pandora on his back as punishment for his part in the Titanomachy. The temple moved with him. The desert had no fixed geography. The task of reaching the temple was itself an act of navigation that most men could not have conceived of surviving. Kratos navigated it. He crossed the desert, following the distant shape of the Titan visible on the horizon through the heat and the pale light of a sky that seemed to press down on the sand with particular intent. He climbed the Titan, which was like climbing a mountain that was also a living being, that shifted and breathed and occasionally seemed aware of the small figure making its way upward along its skin. The scale of Kronos was difficult to hold in the mind. He was not simply large. He was the kind of large that requires the mind to revise its understanding of what large means, that makes ordinary landscape comparisons inadequate. He was a geological feature that moved. He entered the Temple of Pandora and moved through its chambers, a series of trials designed to kill everyone except the one person capable of enduring them. which is the kind of design that suggests the builder did not want many people to succeed. The traps were intricate and merciless, designed with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world, which the designer had in the literal sense, because the designer had been walking through a desert for longer than most civilizations had existed. Kratos endured them, not through cleverness exactly, but through the specific combination of skill and refusal that had defined him since the battlefield where he had first called on Ares. He found Pandora's box and took it, and was immediately killed by Ares, who had been watching and who reached across the distance with a convenient divine intervention that flung Kratos into the underworld and took the box for himself. The underworld, in this cosmology, was Hades's domain, vast and layered, full of the accumulated dead, organized by the nature and quality of the life that had led to each death. Charon ferried souls across the Styx. Cerberus guarded the entrance. The Elysian fields held those whose lives had been good, and Tartarus held those who had been worse than merely human in their conduct. Kratos arrived there not quite dead and not quite alive, in the way that the most important figures in myth always arrive in the places they are not supposed to be, as an exception to a rule that has no mechanism for exceptions. He fought his way back out. He climbed from the depths using the sinews of fate themselves, the threads of the Lachesis and the other fates, pulling himself upward through levels of the dead toward a surface he could feel without quite being able to see. The dead watched him pass with the specific quality of attention that belongs to those who have arrived somewhere final, and observe anyone moving through it with direction as a reminder of what direction once felt like. He emerged. He took the box from Ares. He opened it, and the power inside it, which had been placed there by the gods themselves, the collected essence of divine capability distilled into a form a mortal could receive, poured into him and transformed him from a man who was already beyond most men into something that could meet a god in direct contest. The battle with Ares was long and terrible, and took place across a landscape that bent under the weight of it. Ares reached into Kratos' mind and created phantoms, images of his dead family, forcing him to fight through versions of his grief made physical and hostile, spectral versions of Lysandra and Calliope that moved through the battlefield with the specific horror of things that should not move at all. Kratos endured this too. He reached through the phantoms and found the place where Ares was actually standing, and killed him with a weapon that had been left behind in the world by Ares himself. A weapon the god had once used and discarded and forgotten about, which is the kind of irony that myths are very fond of. The way the things we leave behind are often the things most capable of returning to undo us. Ares died. Athens was freed. The gods of Olympus looked down from their mountain and were satisfied with the outcome, if not precisely with the man who had produced it. Athena appeared to Kratos. She told him that the gods had discussed his service and had agreed to forgive him his sin. She told him that the gods could not, however, remove his memories, that this had been beyond their power, and she was sorry for having implied otherwise. His nightmares would remain. The ashes would remain. The pale skin and the burning memories would remain, and she offered him something else instead, a place on Olympus, the throne of the god of war, left vacant now that Ares was gone. Kratos looked at the offer. He looked at the world below, the world he had fought through for a decade, the world where his wife and daughter had died, the world where the only comfort available to him was power and the performance of more violence. He accepted the throne. There was nothing else to accept. He became the new god of war. He sat on Olympus among the pantheon, and the days passed, and the memories remained, and the nightmares did not ease. and the pale ash did not lift, and the throne was not the thing that had been promised, even though it was exactly the thing that had been described. Divinity, it turned out, does not resolve what has already been done. It only provides more altitude from which to look at it. Before the full fracture between Kratos and Zeus arrived, there was a period that deserves attention, a time when Kratos moved through the Greek world, carrying the weight of divinity that had not been earned through the ordinary routes, through divine birth or the slow accumulation of worship, but through the specific and violent completion of a bargain. The other gods regarded him with a mixture of wariness and calculation. He was useful, there was no question of that. But useful things that are also unpredictable are a specific kind of concern, and Kratos was emphatically unpredictable. He encountered during this period the three Furies, the Megaera, the Tisiphone, and the Alecto, born from the blood of Uranos when Kronos cast him out, the enforcers of cosmic oaths and the punishers of those who broke them. The Furies had a particular interest in Kratos, related to the oath he had made to Ares, an oath that the Furies maintained could not be dissolved simply because Ares was dead, because oaths bound the swearer to the principle the other party represented, and the principle of war, of servitude to war's demands, persisted beyond any individual god who governed it. The Furies captured him. They held him in the prison of Delos, a place built around the ruins of the god Apollo's birthplace, where the light was always at a particular angle that made everything look like memory rather than reality. Kratos spent time there in a kind of internal captivity. The prison was not only physical, it was psychological, using a dreamlike substance called the Eyes of Truth to hold him inside versions of his own past, to make him relive the things he had done in Ares' service as a method of keeping him compliant and too overwhelmed to resist. He broke free. This required, as most of Kratos' escapes required, a quality of refusal that operated below the level of conscious choice, a deep and structural unwillingness to remain contained, rooted in something older than strategy. He recovered the Eyes of Truth himself and used them to see through the Furies' illusions, and he killed them one by one, not with satisfaction, but with the grim efficiency of someone completing a task that needed completing. The eldest Fury, Alecto, was the last, and in her death she created a moment of revelation. She told Kratos the full extent of what he was bound to, the full scope of the oath to Ares that the Furies had been enforcing, and the full depth of what Ares had intended to make of him. The truth did not soften with telling, but it did clarify, and clarity is a useful thing, even when what it illuminates is terrible. The Furies' death released something, the chains of the oath, not the blades of chaos themselves, but the metaphysical weight of servitude that had attached to them. Kratos was free of Ares' claim in a way he had not been before. He was free to be what he was becoming, rather than what Ares had designed. What he was becoming was not entirely clear, even to him, but the space for becoming had opened. It was in this space that the war between him and Zeus gestured into view. He had been helping Sparta. He had been giving his city advantages that the other gods found inappropriate. Not because the advantages were so very different from the advantages other gods gave their favored cities and peoples, but because Kratos gave them without concern for the balance that the Olympian system had maintained, without the careful management of scales that kept mortal politics from destabilizing entirely. He was a god behaving like a patron, and patrons in the Olympian system were supposed to maintain a kind of deniability that Kratos had no interest in maintaining. Zeus intervened. He told Kratos to abandon his allegiance to Sparta. Kratos refused, and refusal from someone who had been created essentially, as an instrument of Olympian will, was a specific kind of insult that Zeus had not yet encountered from inside the pantheon. Zeus's response was calculated. He did not simply strike Kratos down, though he could have, and the calculation that prevented him from doing so immediately was partly the recognition that Kratos, who had already killed one god of war, might not be as easily destroyed as the clean version of Zeus's power suggested. Instead, he created the conditions for Kratos' diminishment. He sent the eagle to drain his power. He arranged for the statue in Rhodes to animate and draw the rest. He positioned himself to arrive when Kratos was at his weakest, with an offer that would let Zeus take the blade of Olympus, the divine power contained in the sword, without the messy business of trying to take it by force from a being who had just demonstrated his willingness and ability to fight gods. The offer: surrender your godhood and live. The execution: take the godhood and kill him anyway. It was not subtle as betrayals go, but it was effective. Kratos died on the battlefield in Rhodes, betrayed by the king of the gods, the divine power he had carried stripped from the blade that now rested in Zeus's hands, the pale ash of his skin cooling in the sun of a Greek afternoon that had no particular opinion about what had just happened. The underworld received him. It had received him before. The dead knew his face, or the shape of the space he made when he moved through it. The displaced attention of other souls watching someone pass through their domain with direction. He was dead, and then he was not. Gaia reached into the underworld and found him. Her voice was not small. It was the voice of the earth itself, slow and resonant and carrying the quality of something that has been patient long enough that patience has become indistinguishable from certainty. She told him what had happened was not the end. She told him that the Titans had been waiting in the prison of Tartarus for the kind of rupture in the relationship between Kratos and Olympus that might create an opportunity they had been too far removed from events to manufacture themselves, but that they could support if it arrived through someone else's choices. She told him the Great War could be won differently, that history could be revisited, that the Sisters of Fate controlled the threads of time, and that Kratos, with his particular capacity for achieving things that should not be achievable, might be able to reach them and use the mechanism of fate itself to reach back to the moment before Zeus's betrayal and begin again from a position that was not dead. Kratos emerged from the underworld. The world above was as he had left it, the ruins of what he had fought through before, the ongoing reality of a Greek cosmos that was continuing without him because it had not known it was supposed to stop. He moved through it with the purpose of a man who has been killed once and is not inclined to allow a second occurrence. He went to the Sisters of Fate, the three Moirai who controlled the threads of destiny, who wove the outcomes of mortal and divine lives alike, who were perhaps the only entities in the Greek cosmos that even the gods could not simply override through will or violence. They lived at the edge of the world, in a place called the Palace of the Fates, surrounded by the apparatus of destiny, enormous looms and mechanisms of a complexity that suggested the management of fate was a more literal and more mechanical process than poets usually imagined. The threads they worked with were not metaphorical. They were actual constructs, tangible and responsive, each one corresponding to a life in the mortal and divine world. Kratos fought his way to them. He fought creatures and guardians and the specific resistance that very old and very powerful places offer to anyone who intrudes on them uninvited. He fought the Titan Perseus, who had come to the Fates seeking his own appeals, and found in Kratos not a fellow supplicant but an obstacle. He navigated the Atlas, the Titan who had been condemned to hold the world on his shoulders after the Titanomachy, a punishment that was not designed to be endured, but that had been endured, because endurance is not a choice when the alternative is the world falling. He reached the sisters, and he demanded something that no mortal and very few gods had ever demanded: the ability to travel back through his own timeline, to reach back through the thread of his own life, and arrive at the moment he needed. The sisters of fate did not give this willingly. Clotho wove, Lachesis measured, Atropos cut. Each had her function and her conviction that the function was immutable, that destiny was not a suggestion, but a fact, that the threads could not be pulled in directions other than the ones they had already been laid. Kratos was not interested in the distinction between destiny and fact, the confrontation between an immovable principle and an unstoppable will, produced, as such confrontations always eventually produce, a new outcome. He killed Atropos. He defeated the others. He took control of the great mirror at the center of their palace, the portal of the gods, and he used it to reach backward through time. He arrived at the moment before Zeus killed him in Rhodes. He reclaimed the blade of Olympus and reclaimed the divine power stored within it, and returned to his own present, carrying everything he had surrendered. And then, because the portal still held, because Gaia had arranged what she had arranged, he went further. He went back to the Titanomachy itself, to the moment when the tide was turning against the Titans, and he offered them a way back. The Titans rose from Tartarus like a geological event, like the world remembering something it had suppressed. They erupted, enormous beings, each one a force of nature given form, climbing the sides of Mount Olympus. Gaia was among them, vast and purposeful, pulling herself upward with the hands of mountains. Kronos was there, so large that the landscape near him had to reorganize itself to accommodate his presence. Epimetheus, Perses, Oceanus, each one a being that the world had been designed at one time to accommodate and had since tried to forget. They climbed toward Olympus, while the gods above looked down in the disbelief of those who had believed for too long that what was imprisoned stayed imprisoned. The surprise of the gods in that moment was not merely tactical, it was philosophical. They had organized their understanding of reality around the permanence of what they had established. Tartarus was permanent. The Titanomachy was concluded. The order of Olympus was fixed. Kratos had reached into the architecture of their certainty and dismantled it from the inside, using the one mechanism, fate, that they had trusted absolutely. What followed was the destruction of the Greek world. The war between the Titans and the Olympians, replayed with Kratos in the equation, was a catastrophe of a scale that made the original Titanomachy look like a disagreement. The world below Olympus suffered for the conflict above it, storms and earthquakes, and the failure of divine functions that mortals had long since stopped thinking of as functions and simply thought of as the way things were. Poseidon, the god of the seas, was the first of the great Olympians to fall. He came at Kratos astride the beast of the ocean, the hippocampus, enormous and furious and carrying the weight of a god's wounded pride. Because Poseidon had always considered himself Zeus's equal or near enough, and the fact that these titans had reached Olympus at all was a personal failure that he needed to correct by defeating the man at the center of it. He fought Kratos at the summit of Olympus, with the full power of the sea behind him, the water responding to his will like an extension of his body, crashing against the mountain in waves that carved stone. The fight was enormous and lasted long enough that the sea below changed its behavior. grew wilder, less organized, anticipating what it might become. Poseidon died. The sea did not mourn him exactly, but it remembered him in the only way that natural forces remember, by being different in his absence, by expanding into the space his governance had occupied, and becoming something rawer and less defined. Hermes fell, and with him the swiftness of things. He had been a messenger and a trickster, the god of boundaries and crossings, of transitions, of the moments between one state and another. He was fast, genuinely fast in a way that made pursuit a philosophical exercise rather than a physical one, and he used this speed with the specific cruelty of someone who has always been able to run away, and therefore has never learned the discipline of staying. His death removed something from the world that was harder to articulate than the sea or the sun, the quality of quick movement, the possibility of covering distance faster than expected. Things slowed imperceptibly in a way that would not be noticed until much later. Helios, the sun, was extinguished. The light failed in the way that light fails when it loses its source. Not all at once, but incrementally. A dimming that was at first almost imperceptible and then undeniable. The shadows lengthening past their natural bounds. The color draining from the landscape with the slow inevitability of something that had been decided elsewhere and was only now arriving here. Kratos took the head of Helios as a lantern, which is a detail that is both practical and terrible. The kind of detail that myths include when they want to capture something about the character of the person doing the taking. Hephaestus died in the forge he had tended for millennia, in the underground chambers where the heat was constant and the metal always soft, and the products of his work had shaped the fate of gods and mortals alike. He was the craftsman, the maker, the one whose products, the blades of chaos, the armor of the gods, the mechanisms of the labyrinth, had appeared throughout Kratos' life without Kratos ever having full knowledge of the hand behind them. He had tried to protect Pandora, the construct he had made in the image of his daughter, because she was the thing in his long life that had remained uncorrupted, that still carried the quality of innocence that the rest of Olympus had traded away a long time ago. He failed to protect her. Pandora, who held the key to the second Pandora's box, not the vessel of the Titanomachy, but the labyrinthine prison that Hephaestus had built under Zeus's instruction, containing within it the one thing powerful enough to end the reign of the gods, sacrificed herself to open the flame that barred the box's true contents. The flame consumed her, and Kratos held the space she had occupied a moment before, with the specific quality of grief that belongs to those who know, even as they are losing something, that what they are losing, they should not have allowed themselves to find in the first place. She had reminded him of Calliope. That was the truth of it, and the truth of it was that the world had placed something in his path that he could not save, just as it had before, and the repetition was not accidental. The world does not repeat accidents, only patterns, and patterns have to be recognized before they can be changed. The box was opened. Inside, nothing visible, no weapon, no concentrated divine energy, nothing that could be picked up and aimed. The void of it, after everything, was the kind of conclusion that makes the person confronting it question whether they have understood the problem correctly. Zeus appeared. He was not triumphant. He was tired, in the way of beings who have managed something very large for a very long time, and have arrived at the point where managing it is no longer generative but simply necessary. He had been maintaining the order of Olympus against the forces that would undo it for longer than most civilizations had existed, and the effort had not made him wiser or more generous or more connected to the things he governed. It had made him certain in the way that long effort makes people certain certain that the thing they have been doing is correct because they have been doing it so long. He and Kratos fought. The world shook. The summit of Olympus, which had been the most stable place in the Greek cosmos, became the least stable, the site of a confrontation that the stone and sky could barely contain. They fought through the ruins of everything that the conflict had already destroyed, across surfaces that had been transformed by the scale of the previous battles, in a landscape that was barely recognizable as the place it had once been. Kratos killed Zeus, or nearly. Zeus died, and then something essential animated the body past death. Some reserve of power, some final convergence of divine will and the determination that had defined him, pressing Kratos into darkness, reaching for the conclusion that normal death had not quite produced. The darkness was physical, pressing, the specific quality of an ending being enforced. And then, hope. The power that Pandora's box had released, not visible, not tangible, but real, moved through Kratos. He had carried it since the first time he had opened the box, unknowing, the way people carry things they do not know they have, and it had survived everything. The grief and the ash and the godhood and the betrayal and the killing of gods and the loss of Pandora and the long, exhausting weight of a life defined by other people's requirements. Hope, specifically and quietly, had survived all of it. Because hope is not optimism. It does not require good conditions or encouraging evidence. It is something else, something more fundamental, something that exists as a kind of structural fact in beings that continue choosing to act. Kratos released it outward, not into a weapon or a specific purpose, but outward, into the world, the devastated and godless and rearranging world, diffuse and uncontained, drifting across the ruins like the first warmth after a winter that had lasted too long. Athena appeared at the end. She was present as she had been present at so many critical junctures, with the air of someone who has been working towards something for a very long time and has arrived at the moment of collection. She had orchestrated or observed, or at minimum, very patiently allowed the orchestration of the sequence of events that had led to this moment, believing that at the end of it there would be divine power available for collection, the distilled essence of Olympian divinity that could be used to build something new, something better designed, something more to her specification than the messy and unmanageable and ultimately self-destructive system that Olympus had been. There was nothing to collect. The hope was gone, dispersed, no longer locatable in any one place. The world was rubble. The gods were dead. Athena left with the specific patience of someone who has had a very long horizon and is capable of waiting for the next opportunity, because she has always found the next opportunity before. Kratos lay on the edge of the cliffs above Greece, the blade of Olympus through his own chest. He had stabbed himself, not in despair, not in surrender, but in the way that certain gestures are both symbolic and real, in the way that giving something away requires creating an opening for it to pass through. He pulled the blade free. He fell from the height into the sea below. The sea received him, and the sea, or something in the continuity beneath events, kept him. There is a gap in the story here, a necessary pause. The ruins of Greece settling, the sky finding a new relation to the ground now that Helios was gone, the waters remembering their own borders without Poseidon to manage them. The world did not end when the gods died. It changed. It became quieter in some places, louder in others, stranger in both. The mortals who remained tried to understand what they had inherited, a world without divine governance, a world that would have to find its own principles of organization. which is a harder thing than it sounds when you have spent generations believing the principles were given from above. Kratos survived, wounded and alive, and carrying the ash that had been on his skin since the burning temple, the marks of everything he had done visible on his body, the way that very old trees carry the marks of every storm they have endured. Not as damage exactly, but as record. He was a record of himself, walking through the world he had unmade, looking for the edge of it. He went north. It is not entirely clear what directed him, whether it was intention or the specific exhaustion of someone who has finished the only thing they knew how to do and needs to put distance between themselves and the doing. The Greek world could not hold him. It had been the context for everything he had been, and everything he had been was now ash and memory. North was the direction that had no weight yet, no accumulated meaning, no name in the mythology he was trying to leave behind. The journey was long and mostly internal. He crossed lands that Greek cartographers had left blank, the edges of maps where the known world gave way to the speculation of those who had never been there. He moved through climates that shifted from the golden dryness of the Mediterranean world into the grey-green dampness of northern forests, into colder air that arrived slowly and then became the baseline, the new normal, the weather of wherever he was going. He arrived eventually in the Norse world. The Norse world was old in its own way, not the same age as the Greek cosmos, not structured the same way, not governed by the same principles. Where the Greek cosmos had been organized around the narrative of power, who had it, who had taken it from whom, who would take it next, the Norse cosmos was organized around the narrative of fate. The Norns sat at the well of Urd and wove the destinies of gods and men alike. And the destinies they wove were not hidden or mysterious, but simply true, visible to those with the capacity to see, inscribed in the structure of reality like grain in wood. Yggdrasil, the world tree, connected the 9 realms the way a central nervous system connects the extremities of a body, not merely as a structural element, but as a living conduit, carrying information and intention between the parts of the whole. The 9 realms were not separate places, so much as different aspects of one enormous, interconnected existence. Asgard, home of the Aesir gods. Vanaheim, home of the Vanir. Alfheim, the realm of the light elves, where the light was different from anywhere else, carrying a quality of attention. Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves, carved and tunneled and organized around the work of making. Niflheim, the realm of mist and poison. Muspelheim, the realm of fire. Helheim, the realm of the dishonored dead. Jotunheim, the realm of the giants. And Midgard, the middle realm, the realm of mortals, the central world that the others surrounded and touched. Kratos settled in Midgard. He found a forest and built a house with the deliberateness of someone who is choosing, for the first time, to make something that is not a weapon. The house was not elaborate. It was sufficient, which is a different aspiration than elaborate and in many ways harder to achieve, because sufficient requires knowing what you need rather than simply building until you run out of material or energy. He was good at building. The physical competence that had made him a soldier and a god translated readily into construction, understanding load and balance, and the way that different materials work together, the patience of placing one thing correctly before moving to the next. He found Faye, or she found him. The details of their meeting are not entirely clear, and the ambiguity is appropriate. Some things are private by nature, and the beginning of a relationship between two people who are both practiced in solitude and careful with their histories is one of them. She was, in appearance, a human woman, a hunter, at home in the forest in the way that people are at home in places they have chosen to make their home rather than the places they were born. She carried herself with a quality of knowing, not the aggressive knowing of someone performing expertise, but the quiet kind, the kind that belongs to people who have paid attention for a long time and have stopped needing to announce what they have noticed. She was, in reality, Lorfe the Just, a frost giant, the last of a particular lineage, a seer whose capacity for seeing the future was among the most reliable and most complete of her people. She had seen what was coming for the Norse world. She had seen Ragnarok, the details of it, the shape of what would need to happen for what came after to be possible. And she had seen a pale man coming from the south, carrying ash on his skin, and she had understood that this man was the key, not because of his violence, though his violence was relevant, but because of the son they would have together. She chose him knowing what he was. She loved him knowing what it would cost. This is the detail that the story of God of War holds with the most care, because it is the detail that asks the most of the audience. Can you understand a love that is also a plan, a tenderness that is also a calculation, a life chosen with full knowledge of its ending? Faye believed that she could hold both things at once, the love and the purpose, and that the love did not become less real because it was also useful. They had a son. They named him Atreus. Atreus grew up in the forest with the specific quality of childhood that belongs to children raised in solitude, deeply knowledgeable about the natural world, deeply uncertain about the social one. He could track animals across frozen ground. He could read runes faster than most adults. He understood the behavior of the forest in all weathers, the signs it gave when predators had moved through, the way it sounded when nothing was disturbed, and the specific different way it sounded when something was. He was his mother's student, absorbing what she taught him with the eagerness of a child who does not yet know what it is preparing for. He knew his father less well. Kratos was present, but not entirely there, physically available, practicing the forms of fatherhood that he could access, which were the external ones, teaching, protecting, providing. The internal ones, warmth, openness, the willingness to let a child see into you, were harder. He had been trained out of them, or had trained himself out of them, or the training and the experience together had built a wall between the part of him that felt things and the part of him that was visible to other people. He loved Atreus. He had not learned to show it in ways that Atreus could easily receive. Faye died. The manner of her death the story does not fully disclose. She was gone, and what remained were her ashes and specific instructions. She wanted her ashes taken to the highest peak of the 9 realms. She had planned for this. She had prepared the path, arranged what could be arranged, left what needed to be left. She was a seer, and seers do not simply see and stand still. They act on what they see, with the patience of those who understand that actions taken before a thing happens are what determine whether it happens well. Kratos and Atreus prepared to honor her wish. They gathered themselves, separately and in the ways that were available to each of them. Atreus with the grief of a child who has lost the parent who understood him best. Kratos with the grief of a man who has lost something he had not known he was capable of losing again. The grief did not bring them close immediately. Grief rarely does. It occupies its own space inside a person, and two people in grief exist in adjacent isolation for a while, before they find the path toward each other. They stepped outside their home and found a world that was not waiting for them to be ready. The Norse world that Kratos and Atreus stepped into was layered with the evidence of things that had already happened and the pressure of things that were about to. The Lake of Nine sat at the center of Midgard, an enormous circular sea ringed by the remnants of a civilization that had been reduced over time by the actions of gods and the passage of ages. The statues of the Aesir stood at the lake's edges, enormous and intentional, reminders of who governed the 9 realms and why the reminder needed to be this large. The world serpent lay in the water, Jormungandr, son of Loki in the older Norse myths, though in this telling, the relationship was more complicated and more interesting, had been in the water since before Kratos arrived, placed there by the reverberations of a Ragnarok that had already happened before the story began. He was impossibly large, his body occupying sections of the lake's depth that the eye could not fully track, his scales the color of deep water where the light fails. When he breathed, the surface of the lake moved. When he turned in the depths, the currents above changed direction. He was not a monster, exactly. He was a feature of the landscape that happened to be alive, that happened to be aware, that happened to regard the small figures on the shores with something between curiosity and recognition. He and Kratos would develop something that was not quite friendship. Beings of that scale and that history do not befriend each other, but a mutual acknowledgement, the specific quality of regard that passes between beings who recognize in each other the marks of significant experience. Baldur arrived at their home before the journey had properly begun. He was the son of Odin and Freya, the beloved son, the one Freya had protected from harm by extracting promises from everything in the 9 realms except mistletoe, which she had overlooked because it seemed too small and too harmless to be worth the trouble of asking. He was invulnerable in the way that the very protected become invulnerable, which is to say, absolutely, because protection that has gaps is not protection, but merely delay. He had been sent by Odin to find the last giant. He moved through the world with the specific effect of someone for whom sensation has become theoretical, who can no longer feel pain, cannot feel cold or heat or the impact of a blow, cannot feel the ground under his feet or the wind on his face, and has been living inside this absence for so long that the numbness has become the thing that defines him. He was searching for feeling the way that people in certain kinds of deprivation search for basic things, with a desperate focus that looked, from the outside, like aggression and was actually a form of starvation. The fight between him and Kratos was the first significant battle of the Norse age, and it established something important: that Kratos in this world was not what he had been in the Greek world. He was older and more careful, and the caution that age and loss had built into him was a different kind of strength than the relentless momentum of his younger self. He was not less dangerous. He was dangerous in a more considered way, which is sometimes harder to defeat. Mistletoe, present in Atreus's quiver as the fletching on his arrows, placed there by Faye, who had known what it would be needed for, broke through Baldur's invulnerability. The contact of it on his skin, the first physical sensation he had felt in decades, produced in him something that was simultaneously relief and fury. Relief that he could feel, fury at the cost of the feeling, and the particular anguish of a being who has spent so long numbed that the return of sensation is itself a kind of violence. He retreated, but his trajectory was set now. He would return, and the return would have consequences that extended far beyond what any individual in the story could have fully anticipated. Mimir they found imprisoned in a tree at the Lake of Nine. He had served Odin for centuries, had accumulated the particular weariness of someone who has watched a bad system operate for a very long time, and has become too embedded in it to leave and too aware of it to endorse it. Odin had attached him to the tree as punishment for something he had said or done that crossed the line between the permitted and the forbidden, though the specific transgression Mimir told with the rueful humor of someone who no longer found the punishment surprising. He asked Kratos to free him in the specific way available, which was to remove the tree from the equation entirely. Kratos obliged. Sindri, one of the dwarven brothers, who appeared across the journey as craftsmen and companions, and eventually as something closer to friends, used his considerable skill to preserve and reanimate the head, and Mimir joined their traveling company as the wisest of guides, possessing the knowledge that Odin had accumulated across millennia, the full map of the 9 realms and their inhabitants and their histories, available to a father and son who were navigating that map without having been given any orientation to it. Mimir was not merely informational. He was present in the way that the best companions are present, alive to the emotional texture of what was happening around him, capable of meeting people where they were, possessed of the specific gift of someone who has observed enough of mortal and divine experience to understand that information without context is rarely useful, and that context requires attention to the person you are contextualizing for. He watched Kratos and Atreus navigate each other and said nothing unless saying something would help. And when he did say something, it was usually true and often necessary. The journey through Midgard took them to Alfheim, the realm of light elves, where the light that sustains the 9 realms originated, and where a war between light and dark elves had been consuming the realm for longer than anyone could clearly trace the origin of. The light of Alfheim, which Kratos needed to access a part of the path forward, involved moving through this war without making it worse, or at minimum, without making it substantially worse, which is a difficult calibration when you are moving through a war zone with the intent of taking something from it. They went to Helheim, the cold realm, the realm of those who died without honor, the realm that holds the dishonored dead in the specific quality of cold that is not merely temperature, but meaning. The cold of Helheim is the cold of being forgotten, of having died in a way that the living world does not commemorate. To warm the path through it required the specific fire that the blades of chaos carried, the fire of the bargain with Ares, the fire that had burned in them since the day of the temple, the fire that Kratos had tried to bury and leave behind, because it was the fire of everything he had done that he could not undo. He retrieved the blades from where he had hidden them. He carried them again. The retrieval was not easy in the way that retrieving something merely physical is not easy. It was easy in that way, and hard in every other way. In the way that picking up something you have put down because it was too heavy reveals that the thing has not gotten lighter in the interval, that you have merely been somewhere where you were not required to carry it. Atreus watched his father retrieve the blades and carry them, and the watching was one of the first moments in which Atreus began to understand that his father had a past that was not simply prior to him, but constitutive of him, that the distance his father kept was not indifference, but the specific caution of someone who has learned, at great cost, what the absence of caution produces. In Helheim, a vision of the past appeared. Faye, moving through a memory that the cold realm preserved, because cold preserves everything, standing in the space of the life she had arranged before she died. They saw her clearly for the first time since her death, not as she had been to them, wife and mother, but as herself, moving with purpose through the larger design she had been working within. The seeing was a gift and an ache simultaneously. Atreus fell ill. He had been carrying something that his body did not know how to process. The suppressed knowledge of his own nature, the identity that had been kept from him for reasons that made sense to the people keeping it, but that his body, at some level below consciousness, was trying to reconcile. The illness manifested as fever and collapse, as the body's version of an argument that could not be had any other way. They needed the healing that only certain kinds of divine knowledge could provide. They went to Asgard, briefly, dangerously, in the specific way of going somewhere you are not supposed to go when you have no alternative. They found what they needed, and in finding it, they moved one step closer to the revelation that Atreus was building toward. Kratos told him the truth. He did not do it easily or at all once, because truth of this kind, the truth that reconfigures the relationship between parent and child, that asks the child to incorporate the parent's history into the present understanding of who the parent is, does not arrive easily. It arrives because it has to, because the weight of it has accumulated past the point where the container holds, and the only choice left is the manner of the opening. He told Atreus he was a god. He told Atreus about Greece. He told him about the ashes, what they were, who they had been, how they had arrived on his skin. He told him about the blades of chaos and the bargain and the burning temple and the sound, afterward, of a world that had continued despite what he had done in it. He told him in the specific language of a man who does not speak easily about the interior of himself, which means he told him in pieces, factually, with the affect of someone reporting something rather than confessing it. And the reporting was its own kind of courage. Not the courage that advances into danger, but the courage that remains in exposure. Atreus listened. He was 12, in the body of someone who had been raised in a difficult world, with a father who had taught him survival and a mother who had taught him depth. He listened, and the listening required everything he had. The capacity to hold something enormous and not drop it, to expand, to contain information that rearranged the structure of what he had believed about everything. He did not fully succeed at first. The knowledge that he was a god changed his behavior in the way that new knowledge always changes behavior when it is not yet integrated. It came out sideways, in overconfidence and reduced empathy, in the specific loosening of constraint that follows the discovery of identity. He made a mistake that cost a life. He used his newfound confidence in a moment where it was not earned, and the moment did not survive his confidence. The mistake settled into him. He carried it, and in carrying it, he did something important. He began to understand that power is not the same as rightness, that being a god does not alter the weight of the consequences of your actions, that his father's warning, do not be what you are capable of being if you are not also becoming what you should be, was not a limitation, but a description of the only path available to someone with genuine power. The journey continued deepening. They met Sindri and Brok, the dwarven brothers who had made Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, a commission they had fulfilled to professional satisfaction and personal complication, because making the best thing you have ever made for someone who would use it to do what Thor used it for is its own kind of moral accounting. Brok was direct and frequently loud and possessed of the specific honesty that people have when they have stopped caring whether their honesty is welcome. Sindri was more careful, more anxious, more precise. A craftsman who brought to emotional situations the same attention to detail he brought to metalwork, which meant he noticed everything and was consequently overwhelmed by more of it than was comfortable. They became something to Kratos and Atreus that was not exactly family, and was not exactly allies, and was closer to both than either. The kind of people who appear in your life at the right time and stay, and whose staying changes the shape of what the journey is. The final approach to Jotunheim required a mechanism that only the giants had created, a special realm travel used specifically for that destination, requiring a key that Faye had hidden for them at the base of a great tree in Midgard, a key she had placed there when she set the journey in motion, in the way that she had arranged everything, in advance, with care, in full knowledge of what would be needed and when. The realm door opened. They crossed into Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, which had been unreachable to Odin for longer than he had been searching for it, which was why the giants had been able to do what they had done within it without interference. The realm was still in the way of places that have been empty of their primary inhabitants for a long time. The giants were gone, killed by Thor and Odin across generations of systematic violence aimed at reducing the population of beings whose capacity for prophecy made them a threat to Odin's control of events. What remained were the structures they had built and the record they had left. The murals. The walls of the giant realm were covered with paintings, enormous, detailed, precise, in the way that only beings who have seen the future can be precise about the past, because for them, the past and the future occupy the same plane of vision, and the difference is only in which direction you face. The murals told the story of a father and a son carrying ashes to a mountain. They told it in the specific detail that comes from having watched it happen, or from having seen it happen before it happened, or from both at once. The seer's gift is not merely to see the future as a vague shape, but to see it in its particulars, in the texture of specific moments. Kratos saw his own face on the walls. He saw Atreus. He saw the journey they had taken, rendered in paint by hands that had known they were coming, before they had known they were coming. He saw the mountain and the scattering of ashes. He saw the panel at the end, the panel he covered before Atreus could see it, the panel that showed him dead in his son's arms. He covered it. He scattered Faye's ashes from the peak, the highest point in the 9 realms, and the ash drifted upward into air that was impossibly clear and cold, the kind of cold that feels like honesty, and the ash drifted and dispersed and became part of the mountain and the sky, part of the record of everything the mountain had witnessed, the newest addition to a very long history. And then Atreus saw the panel. He saw it and understood it, or began to understand it. And in the beginning of understanding, his face showed something that Kratos watched carefully, the way parents watch children encountering difficult things, watching for whether the thing is too much, whether they need to intervene, whether the child has the capacity. Atreus did have the capacity. He was his mother's son, and his mother had been a seer who had looked at exactly this panel and chosen to proceed anyway. And something of that quality had been transmitted to him, not as knowledge, but as structural fact. Something in the way he held difficulty that allowed him to hold more than he should have been able to. He did not fall apart. He asked his father why he had covered it. He asked without accusation, only with the need to know. Kratos told him that he had not wanted Atreus to carry it, that the future is not a fact until it has become the past, and that carrying the anticipation of a thing before it happens is its own kind of unnecessary burden, and that protecting Atreus from unnecessary burdens was the only form of protection he had known how to offer. They descended the mountain together. The quiet that surrounded their return to Midgard was the quiet of two people who have arrived at a new understanding of each other. Not perfect, not without the complications that remain, but real in the way that things are real when they have survived being tested. They rested. For a time, they rested. And then the winter came. Fimbulwinter descended on Midgard with a weight and a speed that the natural world could not account for. It was not the gradual deepening of autumn into winter, but a sudden reversal, as if the season had been waiting for a signal and had received it all at once. The snow was immediate and heavy. The temperature dropped past what the Norse world usually held, past the cold that the inhabitants had built their architecture and their clothing and their worldview around, into something colder and more fundamental. 3 years of winter were coming. The Norse myths had always said that Fimbulwinter preceded Ragnarok, that the Great Cold was the first announcement of the world's end, the signal that the gods had been dreading and preparing for and trying to prevent. What they had not anticipated was that it would arrive early, accelerated by the actions they had already taken, the consequences of their attempts at prevention, generating the very thing they had been trying to prevent. Kratos and Atreus emerged from their home into a world transformed. They had been preparing for the journey that Faye's wish required, and the journey had happened. And now they were on the other side of it. Faye's ashes scattered, the mission completed, the purpose fulfilled. But the world had not stopped requiring things of them. Purposes fulfilled create space, and spaces do not remain empty. New purposes fill them, whether or not the people involved have chosen to take them on. Freya came for them through the winter. She moved through the snow with the skill of a hunter and the fury of a mother, the two things combining in her into something precise and terrible, a grief that had become a method. She had helped them during their journey, had healed Atreus when he was sick, had been kind to them in the careful way of someone who is carrying an enormous amount but has not yet put it down. And then Baldur had died, killed by Kratos to protect her from a son who had come to kill her. She had not asked for the protection. She had not wanted it in the way it was given. Because Baldur's death, from the protection she had placed on him, from the removal of that protection, was a grief she would have chosen to carry rather than the other grief. A mother's impossible calculation, the love and the control over its expression. She blamed Kratos. The blame was not entirely wrong. The blame was also not the full story. But grief does not usually traffic in full stories. It traffics in the most immediate version of the one that hurts the most. And the most immediate version was that Kratos had killed her son. Thor arrived with Winter's Edge. He came to their home at the end of Fimbulwinter, not in the manner of a god announcing himself, not with the specific performance that very powerful beings sometimes put on to remind observers of their power, but in the manner of someone who has been doing something for a long time and has arrived in the doing of it at a kind of soul-level exhaustion that power does not address. He was enormous, and he was carrying Mjolnir, and he sat across from Kratos in the space of their home with the specific quality of a being who has been given a task and has accomplished it so many times that the accomplishment no longer feels like anything. He had killed many giants. He had killed them at Odin's instruction, systematically and thoroughly, as a response to the prophecy that said the giant's future sight was a threat to Odin's control of events. He had killed them, and the killing had not made him safe, and had not made Odin safe, and had not addressed the thing it was supposed to address, because killing people who can see the future does not change the future they have seen. It only eliminates the witnesses. He had lost sons. Modi had died in the Norse portion of the story, killed by Atreus in the moment when Atreus's new knowledge of his godhood had made him careless with consequences. Magni had died before that, at Kratos' hands. Thor's sons, from a previous encounter with a giantess, were gone, and the loss had moved in him in the way that losses move in people who are not permitted to show them, sideways, outward, as excess force applied to things that were not the actual problem. He brought Odin's invitation. Kratos and Atreus would come to Asgard. They would discuss the path forward. Odin believed that the prophecy of Ragnarok was not inevitable, that it could be navigated, that with the right information, which the giant seers possessed, which the murals of Jotunheim contained, which Atreus might be able to access and interpret, a different outcome was available. The invitation was not a request, but it was framed as one, because Odin was intelligent enough to know that Kratos would not respond well to demands, and had never responded well to demands, and that the history of demanding things from Kratos was the history of those demands being refused, loudly and with consequence. Kratos and Atreus accepted. They went to Asgard. Asgard was everything that the architecture of divine authority produces, when divine authority has sufficient resources and sufficient time. It was golden in the specific way of places that have been built to impress, to communicate power through the material language of wealth and scale, enormous structures that asserted their own importance in every dimension, every surface, every line. The permanence of it was part of the message. We are not temporary, we are not contingent. We have been here, and we will be here. Odin was waiting. He was smaller than the architecture suggested he should be, not physically diminished, but present in the contained, attentive way of someone who has decided that the impression of power is less useful than the actual intelligence behind it. He had one eye, the other gone in the bargain, at Mimir's well, where he had traded it for a drink of wisdom, the specific quality of wisdom that comes from seeing things as they actually are, which is not the same as seeing things as you would prefer them to be. And the gap between those two visions had been the source of most of Odin's particular suffering. He was charming. This is important to say plainly, because the story of God of War does not simplify its antagonists into straightforwardness. Odin was genuinely charming, curious and warm, and interested in people in a way that felt authentic, because it was, in some sense, authentic. He was genuinely interested in Atreus. He was genuinely interested in the murals, in the giant lore, in the full picture of what the seers had seen and recorded. He was also using all of this interest in service of his own survival, but the using and the genuine coexisted without cancelling each other, the way that complicated people contain contradictions that are both real. Atreus went with Odin. He went to learn, to access the murals in their full form, to understand what had been painted, to read the complete record of what the giants had foreseen. Odin had partial access to some of the giant lore through his centuries of collection and theft, and forced extraction from imprisoned giants, but the full picture was elsewhere. And Atreus, as the son of Laufey, had a connection to it that Odin lacked. Kratos let him go. Not easily, not without the specific tension of a parent watching a child make a choice they cannot entirely protect them from, but with the understanding that certain things cannot be learned by proxy, that a son who is never allowed to test his own judgment will never develop the judgment required to navigate the world without his father's protection forever. Atreus moved through Asgard with the specific alertness of someone who knows they are in a place that will try to manage them and is watching for how. He was intelligent, and he was his mother's son, and he read people the way his mother had taught him to read the forest, not by examining them directly, but by attending to the space around them, the way they moved through it, the things they reached for instinctively, and the things they held themselves back from. He found Odin's true interest. It was not, as presented, in Ragnarok's prevention for the general good. It was in Odin's survival specifically, in the passage of the king of the gods through the destruction that was coming in a form that allowed him to emerge on the other side still himself, still in control, still the defining intelligence of whatever world came after. Everything Odin had done had been aimed at this: the killing of the giants, the imprisonment of Freya, the keeping of Mimir, the management of Thor, all of it arranged toward the single outcome of Odin surviving what was coming. The problem, which Atreus was beginning to understand, was that the world that came after Ragnarok, the world the giants had seen in their full vision, was not compatible with Odin as its defining intelligence. The change that needed to happen was not a change that could be navigated without Odin's removal from the equation. The new world was not a new world if the old world's central organizing principle persisted in it. He came back to Kratos with this understanding, with the full shape of what the murals said and what the prophecy meant and what it was going to ask of them. He stood before his father in the cold of the Norse winter, and he said the thing that had to be said, which was that the path forward required going through Ragnarok rather than around it, and that going through it meant fighting the gods of Asgard in the full knowledge that the world they were fighting to bring about was a world they might not survive to inhabit. Kratos listened. He had lived through one age of gods ending. He had been the instrument of it, had carried the weight of it, had survived it, and crossed the world to find something different. He looked at his son, who was asking him to participate in another such ending, and he understood, with the specific understanding of someone who has been in exactly this position before, what the choice actually was. He said yes. The war required more than two. They gathered allies from across the 9 realms, beings who had their own reasons to see Odin's order end, who had been living inside its consequences, and had been waiting for the weight of it to become sufficiently large that the cost of resistance was less than the cost of endurance. Freya came. Her grief for Baldur had passed through its most acute phase and arrived at something harder and more useful. The recognition that the world that had produced her son's death, the sequence of events from Odin's manipulation to her own protective magic, to the mistletoe oversight to Kratos' intervention, all of it was connected by a system that Odin had built and maintained. She could not undo Baldur's death, but she could help dismantle the system that had made it inevitable. She was formidable in combat in a way that the years of her enchantment, trapped in Midgard, unable to use her power to affect the larger world, had not reduced. Power of that kind does not diminish in disuse. It accumulates, pressurizes, becomes more concentrated by the constraint. When the constraint was removed, what emerged was not the power she had had before the enchantment, but something more potent and less willing to be managed. Brock and Sindri came, the dwarven brothers, craftsmen and companions, present across the journey in ways that had made the journey survivable and had given Kratos and Atreus something they had not known they needed, which was the company of beings who were not family and not enemies, but something in between, something that the Norse world called friends, for lack of a more specific word. Brock died. This happened as consequence of Odin's action during the build toward the final confrontation. Odin, who gathered souls in a pouch he carried, who had the specific power to unmake beings whose souls he could collect, who used this power in the calculated way of someone who understands that wars are won by managing the variables, and that variables include the people fighting against you. Brock's soul was split, had been split since before the story began, and the splitting meant that when Sindri tried to resurrect him, the resurrection was incomplete. The Brock who returned was not entirely gone, was still himself in the ways that mattered. His voice, his opinions, his specific directness that had always felt like its own form of affection. But the wholeness was not there. The soul split, visible in the way he moved through the world, in the slight wrong quality of a being that is not entirely where it seems to be. Sindri carried this. He carried it in the way that people carry losses they do not yet have words for, that have not resolved into any of the standard forms of grief. but exist as a dull, ongoing pressure in everything they do. He became quieter. The anxiety that had always been part of him compressed into something smaller and denser. He still came. He still helped. But something had gone from him that would not come back. Angrboda appeared, the young giant, keeper of the last soul stones, the granddaughter of Angrboda from the older myths, carrying in her small frame the end of a lineage and the beginning of whatever came after the end of lineages. She was composed in the way of young people who have been raised to understand that their purpose is larger than their immediate comfort, not resigned, not burdened, but purposeful, oriented towards something that she had been prepared for since she was old enough to understand preparation. Tyre walked carefully through the 9 realms, with the specific quality of someone who has been away a long time and is still learning which things have changed and which things only appear to have changed. He believed in diplomacy with the persistent faith of someone whose belief had been tested repeatedly and had not collapsed, which is either wisdom or stubbornness and is possibly both. He looked at the world Odin had built and saw in it the specific kind of structural violence that diplomacy was designed to address. And he was angry about it in the way that people are angry when the thing they believe in has been systematically prevented from working by the people with the power to prevent it. They assembled. They made their plans, the careful kind, attended to by beings with significant experience of how plans encounter reality and how much flexibility you need built into the structure to survive the encounter. They prepared, and they went to Asgard. The assault on Asgard was not a single event, but an arc, a build, a middle, and an end, extending across days of fighting that each had their own character, their own costs, their own moments that would remain as memories in the people who survived them. The 9 realms were involved. The forces that Odin had managed and sometimes oppressed for centuries had their own stakes in the outcome, their own versions of the calculation about whether this was the moment, whether the cost of fighting was worth the possibility of the world that might come after. Thor was there. He met Kratos on the field of battle with Mjolnir in hand, and the weight of everything he had done in his father's service visible in the way he carried himself. The fight between them was tremendous. 2 beings at the absolute limit of mortal and semi-divine capacity, each one having arrived at this point through a different kind of suffering, each one having been shaped by a father who had required something from them that cost more than it should have. But it was what happened after the fight that mattered most. Thor looked at Kratos, at the Ghost of Sparta, the pale man, the man who had also made terrible choices in service of a power that had demanded them, and saw something that disrupted the mechanics of the next moment. He saw someone who had survived his own violence and had come out the other side of it, still making choices, still moving, still becoming. He saw that surviving what you have done is possible, that the weight of it does not have to be the final word. He chose to stop. He put down Mjolnir. He stood on the field of battle, and he chose, for perhaps the first time in his adult existence, not to do the thing his power made possible. He chose the other thing, the harder thing, the thing that looked to Odin like failure and felt to Thor like the first real breath he had taken in years. Odin could not allow this. A Thor who chose independently was a Thor who could no longer be relied upon, which meant a Thor who was a liability, which meant a Thor who needed to be managed. Odin managed him in the manner that very controlling parents manage children who begin to make choices of their own, not with conversation, not with adjustment, but with the removal of the capacity to choose. The manner of what happened between Odin and Thor in that moment is part of the grief that Ragnarok cost. part of what the old world took with it when it went. Odin fought. He fought with the intelligence that had made him the dominant intelligence of the 9 realms, for longer than most of the things in the 9 realms could remember. Anticipating, adapting, using every piece of knowledge he had accumulated as leverage, as tool, as weapon. He had been preparing for this confrontation his entire existence. He had seen it coming in the prophecies and had spent generations arranging the conditions to survive it. But he had not accounted for the full picture. He had seen pieces of the prophecy, the pieces that were available to him, that the giants had not hidden, that Mimir had not managed to keep from him in the long years of his service. He had not seen the complete mural. He had not seen the full shape of what Faye had set in motion, what she had planned before she died, the specific arrangements she had made to ensure that the confrontation did not go the way Odin had prepared for. He was contained. The marble, the small carved object Odin compressed into a form that could be held in a hand, was the end of him. Not death exactly, because Odin's consciousness persisting in any form was Odin in some meaningful sense, but containment, removal from the equation, the specific kind of ending that the story of God of War gives to those who have spent too long controlling too much. Not a grand conclusion, but a reduction, a compression, a becoming small of something that had believed itself permanent. Sindri broke it. The marble in his hands, destroyed, not thrown, not used as a weapon, just destroyed, unmade. The consciousness within it dispersed. Grief makes its own calculations, and Sindri's grief for Brock was a calculation that did not have room for mercy in that direction. What he did was not judicial and not strategic. It was personal, and personal things done at that scale of feeling are neither wrong nor right in any way that neat moral accounting can address. They are simply real. Asgard fell. The realm did not collapse in fire. The people of Asgard survived, rebuilding into the space of a world that had lost its organizing principle and was still deciding what would replace it. What fell was the specific system of control, the architecture of power that Odin had maintained for millennia, the infrastructure of fear and managed prophecy and selective violence that had kept the 9 realms organized in the way Odin preferred them. What remained was not a resolution, because stories of this scale do not resolve so much as continue in a different key. The 9 realms were changed, not healed, not simply better, but different in ways that were creating new possibilities that had not existed before. The people in them were carrying their losses and their survivals and the specific complexity of having been through something enormous and coming out the other side with the same hands and the same memories and the new task of figuring out what to do with both. Freya moved through a world that was no longer the world she had been trapped in. She had her power back. She had her grief still, because grief does not depart when the circumstances that produced it are addressed. It adjusts, evolves, becomes different in quality rather than disappearing. She was deciding what she wanted to build from the materials available to her, which included enormous capability and significant loss, and the specific knowledge of someone who has watched a bad system operate from the inside for a very long time and knows exactly where its failures were. Tyr, walking through the 9 realms with the careful patience of someone who has been gone a long time and is relearning the shape of things, tried to understand what justice meant in a world whose governing structure had just been dismantled. It was not a discouraging question to him. It was the question he had spent his existence trying to answer, and the removal of Odin's answer did not remove the question. It opened it again, made it available, created the conditions in which a different answer might be possible. Mimir remained, the wisest of beings, the man who had served Odin and had eventually been imprisoned for failing to serve well enough, who had helped Kratos and Atreus through the 9 realms with the full map of his knowledge and the full warmth of his character. He was not an ornament. He was not incidental. He was among the most important figures of the journey, and in the changed world, he was one of the voices helping the others understand what they were standing in. Brock was present, though not entirely. He was there and also elsewhere, the split soul making him a figure that occupied space without fully occupying it, that was recognizable in every way that mattered except the completeness, which is the way that the best things come back after they have been lost. Recognizable, beloved, present, and slightly wrong in a way that love accommodates because love is not perfect, and neither are the people it belongs to. Sindri was quieter. He still made things. Making was what he did with his hands when the rest of him needed time that hands could not be idle for. But the quality of his presence had changed. The anxiety that had always been his had compressed into something more interior, less visible, less likely to express itself outward. He was carrying something. He was not ready to put it down. Angerboda took the soul stones of her people and went forward into the task that the end of one age makes possible, the task of understanding what the beginning of the next age requires and beginning to prepare it. She was young enough to be the person who would live in the next age rather than merely witness it, which gave her the specific motivation that belongs to those who have a stake in what they are building, that extends past the immediate moment. And Atreus stood before his father and said goodbye. The goodbye was not sudden or unprepared. It had been building across the length of the journey. The recognition that the thing Atreus needed to do next could not be done from where he was, that the path he needed to follow went somewhere that his father could not go with him, not because Kratos was not capable, but because the destination required Atreus to be arriving without Kratos, required him to be himself, specifically and only, without the gravitational pull of a parent's presence altering the shape of what he was. He had found evidence of giants still alive, not in the 9 realms, beyond them, in the hidden margins of the cosmos, in the spaces that Odin had never managed to fully search, because they were not easily findable, even with the knowledge he had accumulated. Survivors, remnants, the continuation of something that had been nearly ended, living in the careful quiet of those who have learned that survival requires not being found. He needed to find them. He needed to be Loki, to be the figure that the Norse myths had been carrying toward, the one who stood at the intersection of what was and what was becoming, who carried the capacity for change in his specific combination of heritage and history and choice. He needed to do this as himself, as Atreus, which meant he needed to do it without the armor of his father's presence around him. He told his father this. And Kratos, who had spent the entire journey learning that protecting his son from difficulty was not the same as loving him, who had learned that love sometimes requires the specific act of stepping back, of trusting the person you love to be what they are without your intervention, who had learned this harder than anything else in the long and difficult story of his life. Kratos said the thing he would never have been able to say at the beginning of it. He said he was proud. He said it without performance, without the qualifications that men who have been trained away from softness attach to softness. He said it as a fact, simply, the way that the most important truths are said, without decoration, without the hedging that comes from not being sure the truth will be well received. Atreus heard it. He received it with the quality of someone who has been waiting for something for a long time and has not allowed themselves to expect it, and so its arrival is both exactly what was hoped for and surprising enough to be a gift rather than merely a confirmation. They embraced, and the embrace held for a moment both the father who had been learning to be present and the son who had been learning to be himself, in the specific quality of contact that says, "I see you, and the seeing is love, and the love is real." And then Atreus went. He went north or east or into the spaces between the realms that most beings never find, carrying his bow and the name his mother had given him, Loki, and the name his father had called him, Atreus, and all the layers of what he was, which was more than anyone around him had fully accounted for, and which he was only beginning to understand. The path ahead was not mapped. He was going to find people who had survived in secret, and he did not know exactly where they were or what they would require of him when he found them. And the not knowing was not frightening to him in the way it might have been at the beginning of the journey. It was the condition of going forward, the condition of becoming rather than simply being. Kratos remained in Midgard. He stood at the edge of his home in the Norse world that had become his world, and watched his son's direction until the direction was no longer visible in the landscape and was only available as a knowledge, a certainty, a felt sense of where Atreus was going. The world around him was different than it had been before the journey, not only changed by Ragnarok and its aftermath, changed by the 9 months of traveling through it with his son, changed by the conversations and the silences and the moments of contact that had slowly built something between them, that neither of them had known how to begin, but that had built anyway, the way that certain things build without being consciously constructed. He had learned things about himself in his son's company that he could not have learned alone, because alone does not provide the specific friction of love. The way that loving someone causes you to encounter the places in yourself that love requires you to expand. He was still the Ghost of Sparta. The ash remained. It had always remained. It would always remain. It was not a wound that healed, but a record that persisted, and he had stopped trying to be free of it and had started trying to understand what it meant to carry it without being only it. There is a difference, and the difference is not small, and finding it is the work of many years and is never entirely finished. The blades of chaos were still with him. He had retrieved them for Helheim, and he had kept them because the keeping was honest. They were part of him. They were the record of what had been done, and the instrument of what he was, and pretending otherwise was a form of dishonesty that served nothing. He carried them. He would continue to carry them. The carrying was not shame and was not pride. It was the specific quality of a man who has accepted the full inventory of what he is and is moving forward with it rather than in spite of it. The Norse world was entering whatever came after an age. The age of the Aesir's unchallenged authority was over. What replaced it was not yet clear. These things are never immediately clear, because the shape of a new age is determined by the actions of many people over many years, and the people were still in the early days of those years, still learning what the new conditions allowed and what they required. But the possibility existed, the specific possibility that had not existed before, the possibility of a world organized around something other than one being's survival and one being's control, was now real, was in the air, was something that people could feel and orient toward, even without being able to name it exactly. Freya felt it, Tyr felt it, Angerboda carried it forward in her hands. Mimir spoke of it with the specific warmth of someone who has waited for something for a very long time and is watching its first stages emerge, and Kratos felt it, standing in the Norse winter that was lightening slowly toward the spring that comes after even the longest winters. Felt it the way that people feel things that are larger than themselves. not through intellectual recognition, but through the body, the hands, the quality of air on skin, the way the world sounds when the pressure of something enormous has passed. He breathed. The ash on his skin was not lighter. The memories were not gone. The long and terrible and necessary history of who he had been was not resolved into something simple or clean. But there was spring under the winter, and the spring would come. And his son was in the world, following a thread toward people who had survived in secret, in the hidden margins of the cosmos, and the thread was real, and the people were real, and the world they were building toward was real, even if none of them could yet see its full shape. This is the truth that the god of war carries in the end. Not that the things we have done can be undone, not that the marks of them can be removed, not that grief and guilt and the accumulated weight of long, difficult lives eventually become lighter. It does not promise any of those things, because it is an honest story, and honest stories do not make promises they cannot keep. What it carries instead is simpler and harder and more durable. That continuation is itself a kind of answer. That showing up with the full inventory of what you are and the full knowledge of what you have done, and moving toward the next thing, that this counts, that this is not nothing, that this is, in fact, the thing. The ash persists, the sun walks on. The 9 realms continue their slow rearrangement towards something that Faye saw once painted on a wall at the top of the world, in a realm that no one else had reached in a generation, in a color that was not triumph and was not peace exactly, but was something that contained the possibility of both and therefore meant more than either. The world turns, the tree stands, the serpent sleeps in the deep water, and the water moves above it, and the water is cold and clear, and the cold and the clear are both honest, and honesty is the beginning of anything that lasts. Rest now. Let the 9 realms settle around you. The Ghost of Sparta is still in the world. His son is still in the world. The story is not finished, and the unfinished is what keeps the door open, and the open door is the only door worth having. The world persists, the ash settles, the sun walks on, and somewhere in the quiet of the Norse spring, a pale man rests, and the resting is enough.